for Lions Central. Here's Brandon Alyssaglu and Nick Kostora.
Welcome into LionsCentralRadio. I am Nick Kostora. We got Brandon Alyssaglu alongside me. And Brandon, before I even give you a chance to talk, we've got to get into this Calvin Johnson Nike Diddy commercial thing that came out today. So for our listeners at home, the first thing we really want to do is play this clip for you. We have the audio from it. Let's analyze it afterwards. But here it is, the Calvin Johnson Nike commercial.
1,964 yards is weight. The interviews, the demands, the fame, slowing you down. The distractions, the hype, the entourage. You're on the leash. You're leashed. There's only football. Getting faster, working on your game, and getting faster. All that other stuff, somebody's got to do it.
That somebody isn't you, Calvin. That somebody is me, Johnson. I got this. You focus.
The obligations,
Put it on me.
the entourage,
Put it on me.
the hype.
Johnson's gonna shoulder the load so Calvin can focus on football.
Man, Johnson looks a lot like
Nah, I'm Johnson.
All right.
Go ahead, Calvin. There's only one thing you have to do.
So Brandon, I think the question here is, are you Calvin or are you Johnson?
Fortunately, I'm probably more like a Johnson at this point.
Yeah,
no phallic joke involved.
I don't even know what to make of this spot for Nike. We haven't. I mean, I guess it's good to see Calvin doing the national spot. We got to see last year Stafford did a couple of ESPN spots, Monday Night Football one and such. But I don't know. I don't really like this Calvin bit. I didn't really. I don't know. I didn't see the inclusion of Diddy being necessary here.
Yeah, it was all right. It doesn't seem like they were that creative about it. It almost seems like something Diddy came up with on his own and was like, this is what I want to do. Do it.
Work me into a commercial with Calvin Johnson. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, equate me with how great he is.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll let the fans come up with their own opinions on that because apparently Nike's running a bit with Calvin here. It's going to get some attention. But the Lions did play the Bills. We got one more preseason game to go over and get through before we get into the regular season. The Vikings game coming up, but they just played the Bills. There was some notable things that happened here, Brandon. What were your quick reaction, your takeaways from the final preseason battle?
Well, I know they won 35-13. I wasn't very excited. I said last week what I needed to see was Matthew Stafford do something to set the tone. And he promptly posted a 0.0 quarterback rating.
Mm-hmm.
Nate Burleson looked just as bad, dropping passes when they actually came his way. Discipline was again a problem. But I'm not going to be completely negative. One great thing that I saw was the Lions missed just 3 tackles on defense after missing 23 combined through the first 3 preseason games. Okay, I didn't notice that. Pro Football Focus did. But I read it and said it on air, so I get some credit.
Hey, progress is progress there. We'll take tackles wherever we can get them. How about we also got 2 interceptions in this game. Rashean Mathis, welcome to the Detroit Lions, and Bill Bentley making a play. I mean, it may have been just being in the right place at the right time, but Bill Bentley getting turnovers, we've had a lot of negative things to say about his coverage skills so far in the preseason. Seeing him actually intercept a pass, that was a big highlight for me in a pretty meaningless preseason game.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, who was it? Bentley and Titus Young. Whew,
Wow.
Willie Young. Both were named to the Pro Football Focus preseason team, and I don't know if that's more insulting than it is optimistic, but I guess a win's a win in some way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bentley's going to get plenty of time on the field this season in nickel coverage and stuff. So again, progress is progress. That's really good to see. Another thing we saw in this game was a fumble from Mikel LaShore. So he went from inept to just useless for me here. He had 7 carries for 24 yards. Just just nothing out of this guy. Joique Bell, though, definitely solidified that second spot behind Reggie Bush, who didn't have any carries in this game. Joique Bell, 4 carries for 28 yards. So just reiterating what we've been through, Joique Bell, if there was any doubt in anyone's mind, there shouldn't be after this final preseason game.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm still on that train that says Joique Bell should be the main rushing threat on this team. I still think that he can deliver between the tackles better than a guy who has a 4.3 yard average. Just saying.
I hear what you're just saying, and we disagree on how Reggie Bush should be between the tackles, but we both have to realize Bell is going to get a ton of carries this season, and from everything we've seen, he can shoulder whatever workload they give him, really.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that Bell will, as the season goes along, will be a little more integrated to the offense, but make no mistake about it, Reggie Bush is still the number one guy, and I'm not pushing for Bell to replace him completely.
Well, another guy that was getting carries in the last game, or in the last preseason game, Stephen Miller got 12 carries. He had 72 yards, and he also had 3 returns and 3 punt returns, and he was one of the players that the Lions decided to cut. He's now on the practice squad, but that kind of leads us into the roster is finalized. We have our 53-man roster, and Miller obviously is a notable cut. Who else would you say were the notable players that Detroit decided to part ways with here?
Well, I guess they've seen enough of Rashean Mathis to go ahead and let Ron Bartell, the star of July, go. It didn't really surprise me that Bartell was gone after watching him in actual competitions, but that fall from grace was a long fall from where he was just a month ago, being talked up as, I kept referring to him as a Don Kelly. Apparently, dreams do not come true.
Yeah, that I don't know how many people were actually buying the whole Bartell's the veteran who's running with the first team to start training camp. We knew it was a hoax from the beginning. We've lamented him on this show numerous times. Just not a starting caliber football player. Another DB that is gone is Amari Spivey. We haven't talked about him since probably the first or second show even, and he's gone. There's another draft pick that we never really saw anything out of Amari Spivey, but I think it's still noteworthy that they're parting ways with him.
I suppose. I mean, I thought he was cut weeks ago, but they kept bringing him back.
Yeah.
I was just going by his play on the field, but no, it's one of those things that are going to be. Anytime a draft pick that is a somewhat high draft pick, like a third rounder, is cut, it's always going to give you pause. But there was actually Kevin Seifert of ESPN did a piece, I think it was this past week, comparing him to Ted Thompson from Green Bay, who is obviously the quintessential build by the draft team, and his numbers weren't that far off from him. I mean, the problem is that the Lions miss on so many picks that anytime they miss another higher or notable pick, that it's unfortunately blown up beyond proportion. Spivey didn't work out. It was a third rounder. I think that, that's what happens.
Well, with another guy here, Chris Greenwood is someone that was cut, and if he clears, he'll be on or he's on the practice squad now. But I guess he's someone that has been injured in the time that we've had him, but he could still work out. It's another one of those draft picks with a ton of athleticism and raw potential. But I mean, you can't blame the team for cutting him and giving him the chance to clear waivers. This guy's he just doesn't want to work out with this team.
Yeah, it's one of those. I honestly was thinking about him in terms of Terry Fair, a lower drafted Terry Fair. I don't know if you remember him from way back.
Sure.
But, a guy that's got plenty of talent and just the stars won't align, whatever it is. I mean, he gutted his way through a few weeks of off-season workouts last season and wasn't able to go, obviously. But I don't see a problem with stashing him on the practice squad. Maybe he can tap that unlimited potential and next year actually make the team. But as of now, that's a loaded backfield, or not loaded, I'm sorry, crowded backfield with bodies, not talent. And, leave him on the practice squad. Let's see what happens.
Well, one player that it was nice, we didn't know if he was going to be cut or kept. We talked about it last week, was the tight end Foria, and they did keep Foria, and I think that was the right move. We talked about that last week, and yeah, it was a smart move to keep him, especially with Michael Williams going on the IR. So we talked about the cuts, but I think that was the one borderline player that we were both really hoping made the roster and then ended up doing so. So that was a really good move keeping Foria on the roster.
Yeah, especially with Mike Williams or Michael Williams. I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate Mike Williams, but but especially with him going down for the entire year now, that was a bit shocking.
Yeah, that broken hand. It's a broken hand. I mean, yeah, again, we talked about this last week. You don't know how long that's going to keep a tight end out. He needs that. He can't play with a club, so if he's out for the year, keep Foria and hope that he keeps developing at the pace that he is, because we've loved what we've seen out of him in the preseason. Looking more deeply at this practice squad, the guys that are going to stick with the Lions in that capacity, is there someone that you're particularly happy or maybe upset? Are you happy that they kept, or just angry that it was excluded from the practice squad? Either one of those.
Not particularly. I mean, like I said before, I'm happy that Chris Greenwood's going to be given another opportunity to develop that talent. And as you've already mentioned, actually, one thing with Foria I want to point out real quick. I think given an entire season in that offense and the inconsistency of Tony Scheffler's hands, I think what I was talking about just a month ago, as far as taking Scheffler's spot, will come to fruition next year, especially when Williams comes back healthy.
Well, it's shocking that Foria even went undrafted, and that tells you a lot about his talent, that he was an undrafted player and he's making the roster outright here before the first season even starts. I'm not arguing with you that he could take Scheffler's job. I just think it's far too early. We had talked about maybe cutting Scheffler for Foria. I just think it's way too early to even entertain that notion. But hey, we get to keep them both for right now, so more power to the Lions. They can have both of them and do whatever they want. As far as that practice squad bit that I had gotten into, I'm really excited to see them keep Stephen Miller, the kick returner. We saw him at running back a little bit too, just because I think there's real potential there, and I wouldn't want to see him maybe wander off to another roster. I want to keep him with the Lions. If Spurlock doesn't work out as the kick returner, which is entirely possible, I mean, Miller is someone that we've seen in the preseason not do great, but there's the little sparks there, potential to be something. So yeah, keep him on the practice squad. He cleared. He's going to be there. Let him keep working and developing. I'm really happy to see him. I don't know, as cuts that upset me. Maybe Andre Fluellen, but that's just, I don't know. I'm just grabbing at air here. The cuts make sense. The Lions didn't have any shockers that are no longer with the roster, and I guess that in and of itself is a good thing.
Yeah, agreed. There was nothing that made me do a double take. But what unfortunately is giving me a double take now is, what's up with my boy? What's going on?
I'm sorry. When you say your boy, I'm not even sure who you're talking about.
Do I really have to use Ezekiel Ansah's name anymore?
Oh,
my dear Ziggy.
There we go. No, yeah. For those who don't know, Ezekiel Ansah has he hasn't been playing. He hasn't been practicing. He wasn't on the practice field today or yesterday. Guys like Louis Delmas and Calvin Johnson are back in pads, but Ansah is not, and we don't know what his status is for Sunday. Jim Schwartz was actually asked about it, and he said the injury report will be out tomorrow. That was all he would tell us on the matter. Brandon, I guess it's our job to play skeptic and kind of try and figure out what's going on with Ansah. Schwartz is playing coy, but do you think he's going to be on the field Sunday, this week 1?
I really wish I had any real idea, especially since we don't actually even know the injury. My gut tells me that even without the practice, yes, he will be out there, because at least he had all offseason to practice. I'm not aware of him missing any other practices, and maybe they're just holding him out as long as possible to make sure that he can get on the field. Did you really think I was going to say no?
I don't. Maybe you were gonna. Maybe you've wisened up and taken the precautionary route. I tried to work that into you with the whole worries about concussions last week.
Wisened up?
Yeah.
Wow. Harsh words.
Hey, I'm not doubting his ability. I'm just saying, with a head trauma, with everything the league's going through, I don't know. I question if he'll be on the field week 1. I think he might be a week 2 guy, but that's just me. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's on the field week 1.
You hear that, Ezekiel Ansah? He's talking about you.
That's not a shot at Ansah.
Use this as fuel. Make that fire burn brighter. And go ahead and, point at the camera. Say, this one's for you, Nick Ostora, after your 6th sack.
However, if you have any type of headache whatsoever, Ansah, be safe, be careful. I just want to see you healthy for the next 10 years as a Detroit Lion.
All right, fair enough.
All right, so outside of Ansah, and I know you thought the preseason action we did see out of him was just the greatest preseason action of any rookie in the history of football, who else would you say was with the preseason wrapping up, who were the Lions' most impressive preseason performers? And that is just such a fun thing to say. Who really just stood out in this preseason, Brandon?
Well, preseason is where Detroit wins championships, so
Absolutely.
You shouldn't take it lightly. But for me, it's got to be Sue and Fairley. The combination of the two, you saw their passion, you saw their dedication. They weren't taking plays off, even though they didn't count. And when one was whenever one wasn't in on the play, it seemed like the other one was. They were everywhere. They're exactly what we needed to see from them. I loved what I saw from them. How could you not?
Well, and to expand on that further, not just Fairley and Sue, but most of the D-line, look at what Willie Young did outside of that stupid taunting penalty that he took against Tom Brady. If we can put that in the rearview mirror, even just this week against Buffalo, he had 2 sacks, and he has looked phenomenal all preseason. Fairley, we've talked about how he's been moving around the defensive line. He's lost a ton of weight. He looks great rushing the passer. Sue is doing the same thing. He's doing better in the middle, and he's lining up on the outside as well. The things that they can do with that defensive line, that was clearly the focus in the preseason, was showing how dominant that defensive line can be and hopefully how it can hide some of the deficiencies that we've gone over in the linebacking core. Offensively, Reggie Bush and Joique Bell were they stole the show as far as that goes, mainly because the passing game was so non-existent. With the first team, Stafford and company, we've talked about how no one outside of Calvin Johnson wants to catch the ball. And Mikel LaShore in the backfield didn't do anything. So, yeah, Joique Bell, impressed. I'm going to keep hammering that point home because he's looked great. Reggie Bush looked really good. And Willie Young, he's my preseason MVP. This guy, I didn't expect him to do the things he is doing. So if he can be the real complement to both Sue and Fairley, this defensive line is just going to be that much better.
So what you're saying is that's why you don't want Ansah on the field. You want your boy, Willie Young, to come in, steal all the thunder, and, maybe we'll be talking about the notable cut of Ziggy Ansah next year. Is this your plan?
I didn't even realize, but yeah, Willie Young did just become my boy. I am a huge Willie Young fan. I don't know where it came from. Yeah, Ansah, we could keep him off the field to get more stats for Willie Young. That's what needs to happen.
Oh, God. Well, that disappoints me, but not quite as much. There were a number of players, actually, that disappointed me throughout this preseason for Detroit. Ron Bartell, but I never really believed it, just like, you wanted to. And it actually isn't Bentley. He didn't play well to start the preseason, but it seemed like he rebounded, regained his footing, and put together, especially in the last game, but he's playing Matt Leinart, so I don't know. Does that even count? It's almost Matt Stafford, because I wrote about it last week for Yahoo. I'm getting real concerned about his inability to accurately throw the ball if it's not Calvin Johnson. It's like he throws to everybody like they're Calvin Johnson. I will get it within a 6-foot, window here, and they'll go get it. Patrick Edwards can't do that. But I think for me, it's Burleson. Just no separation. He doesn't look good. I don't know. Ryan Broyles is obviously still not healthy. The season really hinges a lot on Burleson's ability to get open and catch passes. I don't think he can do either of those anymore.
Well, perhaps that's the reason that he's decided to donate $100 every time he drops a pass in the regular season. So I would assume he doesn't want to lose any money. So maybe that's his plea to say, hey, I'm not going to drop anymore. I don't know. Yeah, Burleson has just been we've seen him do at least marginally well in the past with the Lions, and he can catch the ball. He doesn't have the speed that he used to have when he was younger, or may have never even had. But the fact that he's not catching passes in the preseason, I think alarming is a fair word to use here with Nate Burleson.
Yeah, I mean, he did look good for the first 2 years. He had 128 catches. He can't do it anymore. Maybe I'm hoping he can. I'm very pessimistic. If we did a confidence meter just on him, I'd be down at about a 2.
No, he's not the only one. I don't want to just focus on Burleson. He has been terrible, but he wasn't the only guy that disappointed in the preseason. I think I've mentioned it a couple times. I think Mikel Lashore has just been awful, terrible. I don't know what other words we can use for him. So I don't want to get into that too much more because I think I've driven it to death. But defensively, some players, yeah, Bartell. Don Carey is still on the roster, and he's been terrible. The Bentley Slay battle. Bentley, we saw some signs out of him, and I think Slay did better against Buffalo too. He didn't stand out as much. Obviously, he didn't have the interception, and he only had one tackle, but he did have a pass deflection, and I just thought he looked better in coverage. He's going to be the starter opposite Houston. Slay is. So we needed to see something, and even if it was just a glimmer or a glimpse, that pass deflection was at least, I don't know, a step in the right direction. Is that the right way to put it with him?
I guess.
Yeah.
If you want me to go on the air and say that I think Don Carey is getting better,
No, Darius Slay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. For some reason I got the two mixed up in my head. Slay did look better. I swear you said Don Carey somewhere in there.
I mentioned Don Carey, but I said I don't want to see him on the field ever.
Oh, see, yeah, that was it. I just hear Don Carey, and I go blank for at least 1 to 2 minutes, going, whatever he's saying, it just can't be real.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. So, yeah, we got to hope for positive out of Slay. That's just how we have to handle it because he is going to be starting. So, those are our disappointing and impressive players from the preseason. Brandon, I think this is the part where we let the preseason go. It's over. We don't have to worry about it anymore. It's time to move forward with regular season football.
Finally, man. Finally.
Yeah, and the best way to do that is to lead into our guest on this week's show. We're going to be talking to Scott King of FootballExtraPoints.com. He's a bit of a fantasy guru and a Lions fanatic, which is, well, he matches us a little bit here. So, yeah, let's go ahead and start talking to Scott King from FootballExtraPoints.com.
Hey, guys. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Great.
Well, we're excited to have you on the show. We're excited to talk to you. We're finally doing Lions regular season football talk, which we can only tell you is so much more exciting than preseason.
Absolutely.
Why do you say that, Nick? I thoroughly enjoyed our last few weeks together. Is this about me? Did I do something to upset you?
What made you that? What?
Fine, just roll on. Scott, just go on, Nick. I'll sit here and wait.
Scott, what makes you a Lions fan? What drew you to this side of the line?
Well, I grew up about 40 minutes from Detroit and just started following the Lions, Tigers, Red Wings, and Pistons when I was a kid, and just kind of hung with them. And then up to Ford Field. I never did make it to the Silver Dome, but been to see them in Ford Field, been to Tiger Stadium, Comerica Park, Joe Louis. So just kind of all in for Detroit sports.
Oh, right on. We can all appreciate that, and that's what makes us the Lions fans we are. It's something that you just grow up in, I suppose. But
yeah, you don't choose it on purpose.
So even though Nick tried to say we're not going to talk about the preseason anymore, he might have jumped the gun because I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the problem areas that were exposed in the preseason?
Well, one of the big ones for me was just the lack of a passing game, which I know sounds a little surprising when you think about the Lions, but when Calvin Johnson is not on the field, the only play that they have is a dump off to Reggie Bush, and I think that's really a huge concern that I had heading into the preseason, and nothing really changed my mind there, and I'm just afraid we're going to have, another season of 700 attempts by Stafford where he's dropping back, looks for Calvin Johnson downfield, and when he doesn't see it, he's just going to dump it off to Reggie Bush, and that's not going to lead to any kind of success in the season for the Lions.
Yeah,
no, Go ahead, Brandon.
So I'm not too thrilled with the passing attack that I've seen so far either. But were there any strengths, some surprising strengths, some things you didn't see coming before the preseason that also that arose during the last 4 games?
Well, the defensive line obviously gets the most press behind Calvin Johnson and Stafford, but I was actually surprised at how much they dominated. I rewatched that Patriots game a couple times, and it just looks like a dominating group. And you look at the depth of that line. I don't know another team in the league that has 7, maybe 8 legitimate players on the defensive front that could come in and put pressure on the quarterback. So I was happy to see that group has really stepped up. I heard you talking about the defensive backfield right when I came on, and that front four has to get pressure by itself to give that back 7 any chance, because if they can't get pressure and Detroit has to go into some sort of man coverage and blitz the quarterback, they're going to get burned.
No, they absolutely are. We've gone over that on this show. We think the defensive line is kind of going to have to hide the deficiencies that the linebacking core and the defensive backfield has. It's just how it is. We try and make it sugar-coated a little bit, but the fact is they're not as strong in those areas. But for you, Scott, would there have been another move that this team needed to make or needs to make to be in serious contention in the NFC North, or do you think all the pieces are actually in place to contend right now?
Well, looking on both sides of the ball, you've got on the offensive side, I'm still not full on the offensive line. Replacing 3 new starters is hard for any team in the league. The wide receiver core we talked about, the linebackers and DBs, are concerned. So I just think there's too many things have to come together all at the same time for them to have a successful season. Maybe Reef works out at left tackle, and maybe Slay steps up and he's a good corner. But to expect 3 new starters on the offensive line, somebody like Edwards to step up on the wide receiver side, plus Slay to pan out and Louis Delmas to stay on the field, I think it's just way too many things that have to all come together. And I don't see how the Lions, even break 8-8 this season, unfortunately.
Well, and that rolls right into our next question. We wanted to see, we're going to tease ours for now. We're going to be ending our show with some season predictions, and we're also going to do one bold prediction apiece. So if we could get your season prediction and then one bold prediction that deals with the Lions, that'd be excellent. What you got for us?
All right. Well, I'll go 7 wins for the Lions. I've been kind of waffling around 7, 8, 9 if I want to really give them some wins, but this is a really, really difficult schedule in my mind. I mean, you're looking at Arizona, at Washington, at Pittsburgh, at Philadelphia. These are not walkover games. So I think they're probably looking at a 7-win season. And for bold predictions, I'll go Reggie Bush breaking the all-time record for receptions by running back of 101. I think he breaks that this year.
Wow, yeah, I don't. You're not the first person I've heard say that, but it truly is remarkable. I guess to tie this back to fantasy, if you're in a PPR league, Reggie Bush is pretty much a must-have in your eye, if that's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely, and I have him in at least one of my leagues right now. I mean, you look at that. I think it was the New England game. Didn't he have 6 for like 100? 6 catches for 100 in the first half. I mean that's. And like I said, their offense is Stafford is in a shotgun. He's going to look for Calvin Johnson down the sideline. When he's triple covered, he's just going to dump it off to Reggie Bush. And if he gets 10 targets a game, that's 170 targets. It shouldn't be too hard for him to get 100 catches. So I think that's coming this year for sure.
Well, Scott, let me get you out of here on this, okay? Reggie Bush obviously isn't flying under anyone's radar, but when you look at this NFC North division, and fantasy drafts are going on all across the country right now, if there was one player in the NFC North division who's being overlooked, who truly is a sleeper that is worth a look fantasy-wise, who is it?
Let's see, sleeper-wise, well, I don't think he's a sleeper, but Eddie Lacy I'm pretty high on, especially since one of his backups either got hurt or released, I forget. But, I think Green Bay wants to run the ball. I think he's somebody that's primed for 1,000-yard running back, 1,000-yard rushing season. So I know he's not too much of a sleeper, but I'm pretty high on Eddie Lacy this year.
And that's a completely fair answer. Scott, we always love having people on the show that love talking Lions with us. It makes our day. So we really just want to thank you for coming on and being part of the program.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central Radio Network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
All right, so after talking to Scott, Brandon, I think now we can officially put the preseason behind us.
Yeah, you think a chance to troll you was going to pass me by? Absolutely not, Ansah hater.
No, I would hope you wouldn't let it. It would ruin the tempo of the show. So, okay, preseason over. Looking towards the regular season. In Week 1, our Lions play the Minnesota Vikings. This is the part of the show that gets me the most excited, Brandon.
What? You don't enjoy preseason talk about Willie Young and Ron Bartell?
No, that doesn't really do anything for me. But talking about the Minnesota Vikings and actual wins in the column does. Let's approach this game this way. What would you say is the most important matchups in this game against the Vikings?
Well, actually, I have one on each side of the ball because they're really similar in that respect. It's going to be it's going to be strength versus strength, which is Minnesota's offensive line, which is, kind of gets swept under the rug behind the greatness that is Adrian Peterson. But that offensive line is very good, but it's also going against Detroit's D-line, which we obviously believe is probably the best in the league. That's going to really define where I think this game is won or lost. And as far as the other matchup that I think is going to be extremely pivotal is going to be those two new tackles facing off against Jared Allen and Brian Robeson. They obviously know how to get after the quarterback, knock down passes. If these new tackles can give Stafford some time, he can shred that young secondary in the back. They lost Antoine Winfield, which it surprised me when he retired because he was actually ranked as the best cornerback of last year by Pro Football Focus. But that leaves the back seven without a real leader and with a lot of use back there. Chris Cook is the leader now, and he's only been there for a few years. I think that Detroit can really wreak havoc in the passing game if Stafford can get the ball off.
Yeah, Minnesota last year ranked 24th in passing yards allowed. The matchup for me, you kind of worked it with the offensive line versus the defensive line. Can that defensive line and I guess the linebackers as well stop Adrian Peterson? If there's a front four that can come close to containing AP, it is these Detroit Lions. Will Fairley and Sue continue to be as dominant as they were in the preseason? Is Willie Young going to keep being my boy and keep making plays? If they do, if we can contain Peterson, I think that's been what everyone has said about the Vikings for the last few years. They don't have that vertical game, really. Greg Jennings is a nice addition, but they don't have the passing game yet. We know they don't. They have Adrian Peterson, and they're going to ride him all game. If our defensive line shuts him down, which we think they're at least capable of stopping him a little bit, the Lions should have an easy path to victory shutting down Peterson. Obviously easier said than done.
Right, and that's where the top-ranked preseason defense, rushing defense, yeah, any chance to troll you, I'm taking it. But, that's where the real test is going to come. Is this team actually capable of shutting down the run? I spoke about this earlier, I think last week. I also wrote about it too. It's almost surprising how well they're doing against the run because the adjustments had to have been made. The wide nine is not exactly a run stuffing defense. That's not a set up a wall and not let them go forward type of deal. It'll be tremendous if they can slow him down enough. But you're right, Christian Ponder, he's brutal. I don't have any reason to believe he's no longer brutal. I think you're right there. If they can shut down AP, this could be great. So obviously Christian Ponder isn't the X factor. Who would you say is the X factor?
The X factor for me in this game, and this is a scary word to say, but it's Nate Burleson. And I know.
Shot.
I know.
No, not because it's the game, but because I need one now.
Yeah, it's true though. I mean, we know what Johnson's going to do or what he's capable of. We know they're going to double, triple team him, and I think the preseason has kind of gotten the book out on Bush in the passing game. They're going to at least try to stop him from getting sideline to sideline and letting him get those intermediate routes. Ryan Broyles still isn't fully healthy. We haven't seen tons of him. Nate Burleson is our number 2 receiver for better or worse, and we need a number 2 receiver. Hopefully the preseason was just an aberration, not real. That didn't happen. Nate Burleson is still a competent number 2 wide receiver. I think he has to be because the passing game struggled in the preseason. There's no way around it. And you can't throw to Calvin Johnson every single play. Nate Burleson has to develop hands, and he has to catch passes in week 1. Otherwise, I think this offense continues to struggle.
Well, and that could very well be that I didn't see if, and I guess we don't particularly know until tomorrow if Williams is playing. I thought he's out, right? Sharif Floyd is going to be starting?
Yeah,
is that
he
correct?
Is.
So maybe that could expose a hole there. I know that he's a good, agile, quick, penetrating defensive tackle, but does he have the bulk and the heft to really hold up against the running game? If Joique Bell, yes, Joique Bell, not Reggie Bush, can pound between those, follow Warford straight through those holes and soften up that defensive line as far as keeping them from charging forward, I think the actual X factor is going to be Reggie Bush, because that's going to keep them from really rushing the passer and probably keeping people back there on Calvin Johnson, which, as our guest just pointed out, is going to be another pass to Reggie Bush. And there's nothing in that linebacking core from Minnesota that makes anybody nervous. They're worse off than Detroit in that regard. And I think Reggie Bush can have a field day through there when CJ isn't open. Although that kind of leads to the question: is Calvin Johnson ever not open?
Right.
But
I kind of wanted to go over mismatches and if there are any. Are we just going to say every week Calvin Johnson is a mismatch against any corner in the league? I mean, do we just say that?
Well, and it's a fair point. But I think the people come here to listen to me talk about Ezekiel Ansah and for your in-depth analysis. So you should probably give him something else.
Yeah, I guess that's what keeps him coming back, huh? Well, geez, Reggie Bush can go against the linebacking core, sure. Mismatches for us offensively, it's Calvin, but defensively, if he's healthy, I think Ezekiel Ansah has the speed needed to really wreak havoc off the edge.
Well, yeah, and that would probably be why I have such a man crush on the gentleman. For me, actually, the biggest mismatch, and it's not a positive, but it's Jared Allen going against Riley Reiff. Talk about a baptism by fire. I know you like to talk about the preseason, but this is the first real matchup that Riley Reiff is going to see, and he's getting one of the best pass rushers in the league. There's no time to learn. There's no time to find things out as you go. Here we go. Keep him off Stafford. And that's why I had it in part of my important matchups, and that's why it is the biggest mismatch besides Calvin Johnson against Chris Cook and 2 of his buddies. That's going to be a big key to this game, although I think that there'll be a lot of chip blocks. I think they'll have those tight ends making sure, because if they're not going to catch the ball, they might as well do something with their hands. See if we can bring back Michael Williams. You can use that club.
Okay. So having said all this, having gone into every matchup, mismatch, X factor, everything we've gone into, when it comes down to the end of the game, what's going to be on the scoreboard?
31-17 Detroit. And the biggest reason I think that is Ponder. Mm-hmm. I don't think AP is going to get 300 yards and, maybe he gets 2 touchdowns. I don't see him getting any more. And with that, if they can keep AP from getting, say, 120 yards, that's going to put the game in Ponder's hands. He can't do that. We haven't seen him actually win a game. We've seen him not lose games. So if he's asked to win it, I think he's going to throw a few picks to get that pressure. And with hopefully the secondary is better, at least along the back line, they can take advantage of the mistakes that are going to be made. And you're right. Calvin Johnson is always the biggest mismatch on the field. Yeah, I got to give him at least 2 scores. I think 17.
Shockingly enough, we are both picking the Detroit Lions to win the first game of the season. I don't know if anyone, based on the shows we've done, if anyone could have possibly seen us going a different direction here. But yeah, we are both optimistic to a T here. Yeah, I'm going 24-13 on this one. I think the Lions' offensive woes in the preseason, I think they'll be corrected come week one. I really think we're going to see the Bush and Bell dynamic at its best and fully utilized. We say this every year that the Lions need to have a strong running game. I think this year they actually do. I think it happens, and I think week one is going to be a great demonstration of it. And I think that Nate Burleson does show up. I'm putting faith in him just because I have to. I know I'm going to do it. 24 points for us. That Minnesota offense, maybe it'll surprise everyone and be a really dynamic offense, but for now it's not. It's a rushing offense, and Detroit is one of the few teams in this league truly suited to stop the run consistently. I'm drinking the Lions Kool-Aid. I always will, but I legitimately think Detroit has the right pieces to match up with Minnesota perfectly. 24-13, 30-17. We're both going with Lions wins. How many of those? Just to spread this out, we have to do this heading into the first game of the season. We have to do our full season prediction. We got to win week one. How many games do you see Detroit winning over the course of the regular season?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and get to that in just a second because I want to tease it just a little bit more. But I also want to make it clear that a big part of this prediction isn't so much that faith in Detroit. It's how little respect I have for the Vikings. I think that they're not nearly as good as they were last year, and I don't think the team last year was that good. It took a superhuman effort from Adrian Peterson to get them to the playoffs, and they had quite a few breaks along the way. That usually has a way of catching up with the team, and that's part of the reason I think Detroit will put it on them. As for the season, because I'm a sunny optimist who's in love with a rookie defensive end, I'm going with 9-7, and I'm giving him but I could just as easily see him being 7-9, and I wanted to pull the trigger on 10-6, but I couldn't go that high.
Do you think that 9-7 gets them into a wild card?
I do not.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but I think the NFC South is going to bring some serious. I think you're looking at, probably in New Orleans and Atlanta coming out of there. You've got to have at least two teams out of the NFC West probably with double-digit wins. I think they're going to be on the inside looking in.
Folks, I looked at this schedule up and down, and I tried to find a way to make this a double-digit win football team, and the truth is it's just not. Not realistically. I love the Lions. I love this team, but this is 9 wins, as Brandon said, and I think that's being optimistic. That's our best case scenario is 9-7, and I'm going 8-8 just because they're not going to win every game this season. They have one of the toughest schedules in the league. There's just too many tough games for Detroit to pull them all out. The schedule I don't think is favorable, and to be honest, they're in one of the toughest divisions in football. So. Yeah, 8-8 for me. I don't like the middle of the season. If they're going to take advantage of this schedule, it's going to be early when they're at home against Minnesota. They get to play Arizona, who's still trying to develop their offense. Then they go to Washington, at home against Chicago. The first 4 weeks are going to say a lot about this team, I think, because if we can open strong, there's hope. If they don't do well in these first 4 games, it's tough sledding the rest of the way. I'm going 8-8, and that's still improvement. We were 4-12 last year, but I don't think this is a playoff team just yet. Now, for what it's worth, Barry Sanders has the Detroit Lions winning the NFC North. So if you would rather listen to the prediction of a Hall of Famer than 2 guys on the radio, so be it. Barry Sanders actually thinks this team wins the whole division.
Yeah, that's well, you think we would be the ones that would have this blind faith, and he would be the one that was jaded. But apparently a decade of losing and never getting to where his greatness demanded or propelled that team, or despite all of his best efforts, let's say, it didn't ruin him. You have to admire that, I suppose. But I think you're right. These first 4 games are going to be critically important. If they can come out of that with, say, a 3-1 record, I think that will set them up and give them a chance at the playoffs. They have to win 3 of those first 4 games, though, because I don't think the Bears are that great of a team, and that's their home game. They have to win on the road at Arizona. I think Arizona is better than people think, but they got it. That's the type of game playoff teams win, because yeah, you're right. After that, it gets real rough. And besides that first four, if I was going to pick the absolutely most important part of the season, it's the week starting before the bye week. They play the Cowboys bye week at the Bears, at the Steelers, home against the Bucks. I think that's another place where they got to win 3 or 4 if they're going to have a real good shot at the playoffs. That's the way it's going to be. They're going to be fighting with the Cowboys and the Bears and possibly the Bucks for those playoff spots. Yeah. And I don't, the Steelers aren't the Steelers of 4, even 3. That might be another one you got to steal on the road.
No, it is. And folks, when you look at the schedule and you see teams like Cleveland and Cincinnati and really even Tampa Bay, these aren't the teams of old. These are good football teams. We saw Cleveland is good in the preseason. They're good. Cincinnati, some people think is a Super Bowl contender. This schedule is tough from top to bottom. So yeah, there's patches where there's chances that they can get on streaks, but they have to take advantage of them. Brandon, the direction I want to go here with the season starting and a way to kind of work towards the end of the show here is a bold prediction for the season as a whole. If you're going to make one just prediction that it maybe isn't popular, but you think it's going to happen, where are you going?
Well, I originally had Reggie Bush catching over 90 balls this year, and then our guest came on and just absolutely obliterated me. Didn't look very bold, but he's calling for the receptions record to fall of 101, I believe, by Larry Centers, if I'm not mistaken. I know LaDainian Tomlinson had 100 about a decade ago, probably. Wow, feeling old after saying that. Mm-hmm. But I guess to come up with something different, I think the Lions will be in the top 3 for interceptions for the entire league. Wow. I think that defensive line causes a lot of havoc, like we've been saying over and over again, leading to poor throws. It doesn't hurt when you have Christian Ponder and Jay Cutler on the schedule 4 times, because they're the type that will throw off the back foot trying to get out of trouble. Although Ponder has done better with protecting the football, I just think this is a menace he hasn't seen. I think the Lions go from one of the worst to one of the best as far as getting interceptions. That's 11. They had 11 last year. Tops with Chicago with 24, and a bunch of teams came in about 22, 21. I'd say they improved by at least 10, 11 interceptions.
I'm gonna go with the defensive side of the ball as well, and I think Nick Fairley actually leads the NFL in sacks as far as defensive tackles go. He's not going to be the overall leader in sacks, but of all defensive tackles, I think Nick Fairley, from what I've seen in the preseason and training camp, he looks phenomenal, guys. He's in shape. He looks motivated, and I'm ready to hop on the Nick Fairley train with everything I have. I'm going the most sacks of any defensive tackle. I think someone like Geno Atkins could be right in the mix for that as well. He's a heck of a player for the Bengals. But I think Nick Fairley gets it with Sue opposite him, really taking attention as well. You can't double team him. You just can't afford to with this defensive line. So I think it's bold. Nick Fairley, most sacks for any defensive tackle, and clearly I think a Pro Bowl season for him is in store. He's ready to be a superstar.
Jeez, you just jump from boy to boy, don't you? You just grab 2 boys along the defensive line in one setting?
Yeah, there's only so many left. You better grab another other than Ansah.
Nope, I'm going to ride it out. I'm going to knock this man like that.
You take Ansah and I'll take the field. I'm fine with that. Okay, here's what we do on the show. We like to close it out with the confidence poll. We're going to be doing this every week. Our confidence in Detroit. We started this after the Browns game, and it wasn't very good. And then we said after the Patriots game, it was still low, even though they played really well. They just finished up with the Browns. We're heading into the regular season against Minnesota. Your confidence in these Detroit Lions heading into Week 1?
Well, because the Lions are playing the Minnesota Vikings, and because I have such little respect for them, I'm going up to an 8. I think that the explosiveness of Detroit, that Minnesota doesn't have the right parts on defense to try to counteract that yet. And I also don't think that they can exploit Detroit's biggest weakness in that back 7. I got to go with an 8. I think it's, as long as Stafford doesn't do something crazy and throw 4 interceptions, or Joique Bell and Reggie Bush don't put the ball on the ground a bunch of times, this should be an easier win.
Well, for one of the few times on this show, we are going to be in complete agreement. Yes, 8. This team, I'm happy with what we saw against Buffalo, and I think this is a great matchup for the Detroit Lions. I think we're going to be very happy after this week. we know how to deal with a loss, so if that happens, we'll do it. But this isn't the week for a Detroit Lions loss. This team is ready to win, and we are ready to watch it and bring you all the analysis and review of it afterwards. But as for this week's show, I think that's going to wrap us up. One thing we want to ask you guys to do is really tell a friend about the show. Really get the show out there. We're on Facebook. Lions Central Radio is the page. Like us. Get at us on Twitter, Lions Central PFC. I'm at Nick Castora. He's at Brandon Alisaglu. We're on Pro Football Central on the website. You can go get us on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. Brandon, I mean, we just want people to really interact with the show any way they can.
Yeah, and when we post this show via our Facebook page, via Twitter, we're going to be asking for your thoughts on the record as well. Let's get a bunch of opinions in here. If you got questions, start asking them. We'll get your feedback on air, and we'll address that issue, and maybe we'll have a guest on who will be able to better address what you want to hear about.
Yep, absolutely.
And so with that, we really want to thank you for listening to another week of Lions Central Radio. And for Nick Ostora, I'm Brandon Alisaglu, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.